there's been some interesting developments with the defense. For starters, they're having their offense. Helton particularly likes to go ones versus ones in practice, at least on some occasions. But he's having the offense run hurry up schemes and or hurry up tempo rather, and then schemes that require the defense to be in nickel because you're going to see up tempo offenses in the Pac-12, and frankly, their secondary defenses, which is nickel package, they're probably going to use more often than their primary scheme. So he's really trying to get his defense prepped for nickel and up tempo playing. Because there's going to be a good chunk of their schedule is they're going to have to play quick and they're going to have to cover a lot of receivers. So he's really been working on that, but it also gives the offense sort of a more plays to run, which gives more reps to the offensive line. And it also gives you a look at what the offense can do if you want to change up the tempo when you have the ball. So there's been a lot of situational football for these guys that they're really working on now, particularly on defense. The good news is that they've got Jamal Cook, who's having one heck of a spring, and he's playing nickelback right now. He's just doing amazing things. So that's a name you're going to want to look out for. Also, Bruce Feldman of, I believe, Yahoo or Fox, college football analyst, was at spring practice the other day, and he had a lot of great things to say about Velus Jones Jr. He's a 5'11", about 180-pound wide receiver. If you'll remember correctly, in the 2016 class, Jones he had initially committed to USC, flipped his commit to Oklahoma, then eventually flipped back to USC. Bruce Feldman had tons of good things to say about him. He compared his speed and athleticism to Adoree Jackson. And that's just that's a pretty big comparison to make. That's a lot of hype to live up to, but it's just yet another wide receiver in this great group of receivers that USC has. They've got to replace Rodgers and Juju and a lot of great talent, but if we're talking Adoree Jackson levels of athleticism in some of these guys, the USC passing game could be pretty darn impressive this year, assuming the offensive line can block for him. And then finally, I think the last thing I wanted to touch on is that they actually kept, if you can believe this or not, Mark, they actually kept Sam Darnold pretty constrained on a pretty short leash last year about, what he was allowed to do, what packages he was allowed to run out of. I know it doesn't seem like that. I know it just seems like they just gave him the ball and let him go to town. But they shrank things down. I mean, he's a first-year starter coming in mid-season or, after the first few games. But this year, they're sort of opening up the playbook a little bit for him. So there's been some growing pains. He's thrown, for what this is worth, he's thrown more interceptions in this spring camp than he did last year at spring camp. But they've also brought in a ton of new plays and packages for him to run. So he's learning more things. It's not just roll out and then make a crazy throw and have somebody make an even crazier catch. So that's good news. They're going to be a little more organized on offense. But again, to do that, you are going to need an offensive line. And we're back to the question marks where we started.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get caught up in judging how open the playbook is to the particular quarterback based on how many times he drops back to throw. Oh, he threw 50 passes this game. He had the entire playbook, and they really opened things up. Well, they opened things up, throwing the ball downfield, but not necessarily in regards to the number of formations and personnel groupings and all the things that can get chaotic that the quarterback needs to keep track of. So maybe he had 50 or 60% of the playbook. It sounds like something in that range last year. So that, as long as he can grasp it, which I don't think either one of us have many concerns that he can grasp it, that's going to be so much more the defensive coordinators facing USC this fall are going to have to be concerned with. things that they've never seen before that could be unleashed on them come game day.
Yeah, and a quarterback who can improvise and create things with his legs is tough enough to prepare for. But now when you've got him sort of a wider range of opportunities or decisions that he can make, and he's got a wider range of receivers he can throw to, the receiving core has greatly expanded in terms of viable passing options. We are vastly removed from the days of Cody Kessler and throw it to Juju or throw it away. We're like in the complete opposite of that world now. So it's going to be difficult. I think right now, if you're trying to stop the USC offense, you've got to get him contained and beat this young, inexperienced offensive line. And if you can't do that, it seems like USC is just going to do what they want on offense. So it should be interesting if they can get this offensive line up to speed and running, and then get the running game going. I'm very excited for the USC offense, to be sure. But until you get that line there, I have my concerns.
So we are just 8 days away from seeing USC at least line up, and attention along the offensive line, as we addressed earlier. I, for one, am going to be interested to see what the opening set is. Not that that's set by any reason, but what it's going to be and who's going to be where, and then how much they're going to mix and match. And if you see one guy in particular that's going to take on maybe two positions, a center and a guard position, and other guys that only can play one position, and just see what they're trying to figure out, because that's going to be the first game action that we get to see. At least they have a couple scrimmages there, obviously, in practice that we only hear a little bit about. All right, Nick Dempsey, Conquest Chronicles, talking some USC football. Anything else, Nick?
No, it's just we're getting there. We're getting closer to football season. I cannot wait. But it's going to be a long summer, as it always is. So hopefully you really like baseball to pass the time.
Well, I do. Nothing supplants college football, but I do.
Well, that right, that's good for you, I guess.
We will carve up the Trojans in the Pac-12. No question about that in the ensuing months to get us ready. All right, Nick, thanks a lot.
Absolutely, Mark. Anytime.